it's Andrew Huang. I'm getting over being a little bit sick, so enjoy my voice being more nasally than normal. It's that time of year again. We are going to run down my top 10 favorite plugins this year. So many great releases this year. This was very tough, but I managed to do it, and there are no ties. As usual, I'm not including my own plugins in the top 10. I released 2 plugins this year, one free, one not free. I do think they're top 10 material, but because of bias and all that, I will just show them to you now before we get into the actual rankings. Let's start with the free one. This is Warp. It's also an iOS app, also free. 3 controls, super easy, but so powerful. Mix just blends the dry and wet signal, and then speed lets you slow down or speed up whatever's going through the plugin. So you can be completely fluid with time. You can do all that tape stop type stuff. You can get all warbly with it. The stretch parameter sets how the pitch of the audio will behave as you change the speed. So at 0, the exact amount that you slow things down is how much the pitch will change. Like if you do speed at half, pitch will be an octave down. If stretch is at 50, then warp will do its best to maintain pitch no matter what speed stuff you do. If speed is super low though, you're dealing with the tiniest little fragments of sound, so it ends up turning into just this weird glitchy oscillator. And with stretch above 50, the pitch does the inverse of what it normally would do. So as you slow it down, it goes higher. As you speed things up, the pitch goes lower. Now you may have noticed it says from Transit 2 in the top corner. Transit 2 is the big plugin that I put out this year with Baby Audio, following up on Transit, of course. This is a multi-effect with a bunch of different macro control modes, so it's really handy for doing song transitions, for finding a vibe and experimenting quickly. It's honestly my most used plugin. I get so much inspiration from it. Try the free trial if you want. Just see what it's all about. It's just this super creative tool that turned out even better than what I dreamed it would be in the beginning. All right, on to the top 10. Let's look at Air Windows 2 Tape 8. Air Windows famously has no interfaces for their plugins, and all their plugins are free. They're fully Patreon supported, and so all of Chris's work goes into just making them sound as good as possible. There are so many Air Windows plugins, but to Tape jumped out at me this year just as a really great tape emulation. Push it to some extremes and it's great. It gives that like chewed up tape flavor with the flutter really high. You just add a bit of that tape grit and body and glue. I'm pushing it pretty hard here so you can hear the range, but yeah, I mean, it can be subtle if you want. It's great and it's free. In 9th place, we've got Layer from Aberrant DSP. This is basically a reverb combined with a distortion, but they both have a bunch of different flavors and a bunch of weird controls. I find it just gets a vibe going really quickly. Let's put it on a drum loop. Here's the dry. So the big control in the middle is the reverb length. Dark and light are just controls over the tone. Here are the 3 different kind of reverb engines or flavors. There's Artifact. Here's Mirror. And Rift. Sparsity sort of dials back the washiness of the reverb, and all the way up it ends up sounding kind of more like a delay. You got some pretty normal controls like pre-delay, mix, input and output, width. This is basic but a little out of the ordinary. You can pan the dry and wet signals separately. There are ducking controls, which are always nice to have built into a reverb. And then this section is the distortion, or I don't even know if distortion is the only thing it does. It'll just mess things up. And these controls are actually slightly different in the 3 different device modes. So yeah, Layer is a nice reverb and also just cool as a vibe and grit adder. In 8th place, I'm putting Top Line Vocal Suite from Universal Audio. This doesn't do anything you can't already do probably, but it's a genius package of all kinds of tools that will get a vocal sounding great, kind of like a modern channel strip for vocals. So across the top, you can select these 3 different tabs. There's tuning, informant shifting, and then your compression and EQ section, and finally some effects, modulation, delay, and reverb. Now the magic happens when you put all this together, of course, and I'll just scroll a few presets to show you just how quickly you can find a vocal vibe that you like.
Don't go thinking love is lost. We don't have to watch it fall. We can put back together our hearts, yeah. Don't go thinking love is lost. We don't have to watch it fall. We can put back together our hearts, yeah. Don't go thinking love is lost. We don't have to watch it fall. We can put back together our hearts, yeah.
So yeah, that's Top Line Vocal Suite. I think it would be absolutely fantastic for any beginners doing vocal production, but also even more advanced users. Like, put it on, get something in real quick, and then just remove the elements where you would rather bring another plugin in to do the job of like the modulation effect, or maybe you have a more favorite reverb. Just being able to try out all kinds of different vibes really quickly is such a nice workflow enhancer. In 7th place, I'm putting Kick 3. If you're someone who wants to get really precise with your kick design, I don't think there's a better tool out there. So you can add up to 5 layers. This is the default preset where you have a click and a sub, and you can individually pick which of them you want in the visualizer. And then you've got these pitch and amp envelopes where you can see so precisely what's going on. Like, let's adjust this pitch envelope. At each of these points, I can see what frequency I'm dialing in as the kick goes on. So I don't know, maybe I want it to hang out on a low C sharp. And I can adjust the start of the envelope and how much zappiness I want on it. I can get super weird if I want to. Are you seeing this waveform updates to reflect my changes here? There are so many presets. All of these you can fine tune so much more than if they were samples, because you have all of that control over each of the layers. On top of that, you can add effects. They offer all kinds of effects. You can EQ, you can set up macros. This is the wildest thing. You can import a sample and it will analyze it and break it into a couple different components. Like, let's pull in a kick that I made. Yeah, what'll it do with like a distorted 808? Analyze and import. Sounds the exact same to me, but it's split it up into these layers. They put the original over here, muted. So now I have all that granular control over this sample that I imported. And then there's even more stuff I haven't talked about. You can add harmonics. So many ways to shape a kick. And then one last thing I'll show you about this. You can have your kick triggered by an audio signal. So like, this can be a kick replacer basically. Put it on your kick track. Set the threshold to where your original kick is gonna touch it, and that's going to trigger your new kick. Oh, and then last thing, of course, if you want your kick as a sample, they make it super easy to export it. Drag it right off the plugin into your DAW. So just a really well-designed, multifunctional, no-nonsense tool for you to get super nerdy with your kicks. Next, I want to show you Combobulator. This is a plugin that has AI trained on a bunch of artists who have all given their permission and are being compensated. A bunch of different people with great sound design skills. I'm gonna go with, of course, my buddy Mr. Bill. Now this is wild. Whatever you put into Combobulator, it will turn into more of the sound design style of the artist that you've picked. Let's use that drum loop from before. So using these controls, it's basically a fancy looking XY. These are macros. And then you have a little more fine control over things like EQing and attack and sustain. There's modulation that you can assign. What if I put this on like a totally different style of music? Like my song I was using at the beginning, Gone. This is the original. And we just get all this cool sound design. Squelchy. So I will say it does not behave consistently. You can feed it the same thing and it will just generate similar stuff, but definitely different stuff. And I actually use this to great effect on my track Burst Generator, where I wanted one section to have just different snares. Just wanted the snare tones and textures to always be shifting, and I decided rather than approaching that the usual way I would with different effects or maybe layering different samples that come in and out, I just put my one exact same snare through Combobulator and resampled it while I was playing with it. Took out any that didn't sound great, and I find that that is the workflow with a tool like this. Like you just always have to be resampling and grabbing things that are cool, but it's so fun to play with. Really interested to see where tech like this goes. In slot number 5 this year, I have Ripple from Minimal Audio, which is a next level phaser. So here's a plain little synth ARP, bit of delay on it. And here it is with Ripple. So it can do normal phaser stuff. I want to show you some of the wild things it can do. With some modulation, it can be really transformative on all kinds of stuff. I love it on basses. It's also cool on hi-hats. Like here's some pretty basic hat stuff with Ripple. In context. So yeah, just one of the most fully featured phasers ever. Lots of great presets and modulation options that go so much beyond what a phaser normally offers. Okay, next is New Distort. I am really excited about this one. It's just the most ridiculous distortion ever. And I feel like not enough people know about it. It came out early in the year. It still only has 7 videos about it on YouTube, and none of them have more than 4,000 views. Most of them far fewer. These results aren't New Distort, and then we get into some not safe for work territory, and then no more results. So here's a weird little beat that I made. Let's hear what it sounds like through New Distort. And as a reminder, this is the dry signal we're coming from. So yeah, it's a distortion with a few different types and modes. There's a delay with a couple different types. Just putting a delay in a distortion plugin is kind of an unhinged thing to do. Bunch of interesting parameters. I don't really understand what they do, but they're just fun to play with. And I don't feel too bad about it either, because even the creator of this plugin says he doesn't understand everything that he did. But if you're looking to destroy and mangle your sound in a way that's more interesting, I think, than most distortions, which are fairly predictable, I would say, Nu Distorter's wild. I've been throwing it on so much stuff. Definitely love it on drums the most. Just so transformative if you like to harsh things up. In third place this year, Random Metal from Beat Surfing. Last year, I had Random in, I think, slot number 2, and that was like a synth with a material that you can move around to shape the sound. And Random Metal is their new release, which is like the drum version of that. And instead of a blob, you get different kinds of metal. So you get all these materials to choose from that all respond differently. You use this XY grid to additionally change the sound. And each one is also a kit. So you've got these 12 slots. Each one is a slightly different drum. You can randomize the preset as a whole, or you can randomize just the selected slot that you're on. Some general global synth parameters over here. And then on the advanced pane, each individual drum in the kit gets lots of controls. Let me go through some of the other materials so you can get an idea of the range. My number 2 plugin this year is also a drum plugin. This is Visco from Forever 89. You get a kit of 8 different slots, and for each slot you can load 2 different samples that you morph between. And it does something where it's not your exact sample that is playing back, but it's converted into this blob format, love a drum blob, where somehow like these colors and shapes and the position on the grid represent all the elements of the sound. And that means that all of those parameters can be shifted to a different sound. Let's listen to this kick and this kick and blend between them. And you can hear that's not a crossfade. It's literally morphing between these 2 different sounds. Let's pick a random preset. Down at the bottom, you get global parameters, which offset the individual sound settings, because each individual sound has these same controls. So like this snare drum is set to be all the way to one side, but because of the global macro on transform, it's shifting it over. And then here's the wildest thing of all. You can use these tools to reshape the blob and change the sound. So you can use the finger tool to nudge it, kind of push it around. And the magnet is sort of the opposite. It'll pull things. There's an eraser. You can flip it horizontally. You can flip it vertically. It's just completely transformative, and it kind of shows, you know, what's happening on the XY. Like there's definitely a pitch component to it. And then you've got all these levels of undo and redo. So you can explore and always go back to whatever you thought was the coolest. So just a really fun experimental drum tool. So the plugin I'm giving the number 1 spot to this year, I really struggled with where to place this in the lineup because it is actually the most subtle of all the plugins that I'm including, but I use it on every track now, and it's become a permanent fixture in my mastering chain. So I think that counts for a lot. This is Sound Theory's Crafter. So this is a multi-band parallel saturator clipper. And the reason why Crafter is so good is because it's one of those tools that comes along every so often that lets you make things louder while not making them sound worse. I mean, unless you push it, as is the case for all of those things. So whatever they've done under the hood, you're able to boost volume through saturation and clipping, but it doesn't squash up the transients. The main control is this triangle thing where right at the top, it's dry. At the bottom right corner, it's multi-band. At the bottom left corner, it's just a single band of saturation. And then anywhere in the middle, you're blending between those 3 signals. You can can set your band crossovers here. There is a global drive control, and then each band also gets a shift from that amount of drive. And then offset and knee change the transfer curves. Let me show you an example of it on a master right now. I'm going through right now and remastering some of our Sonic Boom songs because we released all these things as singles, and we want to put them out as a compilation. So I'm trying to get the levels more coherent, cohesive, consistent throughout the whole album. And Crafter is really helping with that, just giving me a bit more level where I wasn't able to push it quite as hard before. And with material I'm working on right now, it just so happens I have a few tracks that I want to boost, and that'll be easier than having a lot of tracks where I need to take them down. Here's Que Pasa.
Get a flash of a laser blast, hear the glass shatter when I come past, smash every window in the plaza. Leave a mass of cadavers in the trash, rolling up on every last human left like Que Pasa.
So you can hear we're getting quite a bit of volume boost, but everything is still sounding snappy. We just get to boost it a decent amount for free. So yeah, that's Crafter. I only have like 5 plugins that are staples in my mastering chain, and it's been years since anything has been added to that roster, and Crafter is in it. Just immediately, it's become such a useful tool for me in mastering, but also it's just great as a saturator. It's great as a clipper, like use it on basses, use it on your drum bus. Highly recommend it. Number 1 plugin of the year, other than, of course, not so secretly, Transit 2, which I use multiple times on every project. The launch sale is still on. Also make sure to grab Warp, which is free as a plugin and an iOS app. Everything I mentioned is linked in the description. Let me know in the comments if you think I missed anything, and I'll see you in the next one.